Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic.
I'm Barry P. Cook. Let's talk about the latest episodes of Stargirl. They were called Summer School Chapter 10 and Summer School Chapter 11. Summer School Chapter 10 starts off with a flashback to the immediate aftermath of the killing of the original Eclipso, or the original Eclipso host. In the flashback, Starman and Pat go over what happened, and Starman laments the fact that he couldn't find a better way to stop Eclipso from harming people or whatever, and that he basically took Pat to a murder. He recounts a story about how his parents had forgotten his 16th birthday, but how Pat had remembered it and had snuck a gift into his room to make it seem like his parents hadn't forgotten. So apparently they've been friends for a long time, and he really treasures Pat's friendship and his relationship with Pat. He tells Pat, in fact, that he's treasured that gift ever since, as well as the fact that Pat taught him how to drive and how to think for himself. And he said also that he thinks of Pat as his brother. He apologizes for not turning out better, but that he couldn't let Eclipso destroy their chosen family. And Pat says, it's okay. You do what you had to do. In the present, Pat tries to explain that by arguing with his family, it's giving into what Eclipso wants, which is to divide everyone. And Courtney tells him, this is on you. At which point the shade shows up by way of falling through the roof into the kitchen. Courtney is surprised that he was wounded because she thought that he was immortal, which he explains is not the case, and then says that he's there to offer his assistance in taking down the beast that has been torturing her friends and himself, and that assistance takes the form of information, which is that if they reforge the shattered diamond without having physical contact with it, it would drag Eclipso back into it. Pat is dubious, but they try to put it back together with the power of light using the staff at the Shade's suggestion. When it doesn't work, Pat says he has an idea. That idea, of course, is finding Jenny, the daughter of Green Lantern, who has the power ring. We discover that Beth's parents think she's crossed a line of weirdness when she tries to tell them about how the visor works. But she assures them that she's fine and she's only gone and found some friends the way that they'd been advising her to, for years. And she then goes to Courtney's house to protect Mike from, I guess, the Shade when Pat and Courtney leave the house to go find Jenny and leave Mike and the mother there. Courtney explains to Pat that it's really awful that he didn't, level with her because now the new Wildcat thinks she's the only member of the JSA to kill someone, or the first person from a JSA to kill someone, which isn't true. And Pat tries to explain that part of the reason he didn't tell her was because he didn't want her to see the JSA or him personally differently, at which point she tells him that the way she sees him has changed anyway, because he didn't tell her the truth. Next, we see that Rick is tossed some apples through the window of his prison cell, presumably by Grundy. We see that the way Pat is trying to find Jenny is by following a spate of green energy fires that have been taking place in a neighboring city. Beth talks with Dr. McNider, who explains that the Shade had saved his life, but that he then ended up getting sucked into the Shadow Realm. And he says that the Shade was probably trying to save the GSA from being killed at the time that they were killed, so unsuccessfully tried to save them. He tells her about how the Shed got his powers, which was from the same diamond that Eclipso was already trapped in during a botched ritual performed by some people in a group called the Men of Tears, who had hired the Shade, before he was the Shade, to get the diamond for them, which opened a portal to the Shadow Realm and made the Shade its vessel. Very weird, kind of Indiana Jones stuff. Anyway, the wounded Shade is still convalescing on Courtney's couch, and he mistakes her mother for his sister and tells her that he's sorry that he left her behind and didn't save her from having to see the death of their father when he fell ill. Pat takes Courtney to the JSA headquarters where he hadn't been in a decade. Together, they realize that Jenny's been staying there and has been trying to locate her brother from there. Pat and Courtney make their way to what seems to be a nunnery, and it turns out that Jenny had been there trying to visit her brother, but he isn't there anymore. It turns out that she set the fires accidentally when she got upset that she couldn't find her brother or his adoption records, and this was even after breaking into the federal building. She ends up leaving the nunnery with her brother's things in the company of Pat and Courtney as the head nurse reports on her existence as her brother's sister to someone named Mr. Bones. So she makes a phone call and says, hey, you know that kid? Well, he's got a sister. We flash over to Mike. He's doing his paper route when he comes across a bunch of people standing and marveling at a rather large candy house. I don't know what that's about. Back at JSA headquarters, Courtney, Pat, and Jenny talk about putting the diamond back together, which Jenny tries to do with the power of her ring. When it works and the diamond is back together, that reestablishes the connection with the Shadow Realm, allowing the Shade to get his powers back and heal, instead of trapping Eclipso. And not only did it not trap him, it summons him, so the Shade lied. Eclipso shows up at JSA headquarters forthwith and tosses Pat on his ass after Jenny zaps him with the ring, which seems to push him back, but not very strongly. And he's able to push Jenny back as well before dropping what looks like some kind of portal on the floor, which sucks Courtney into it, just like it had previously sucked in her nemesis, Shiv. So Courtney went bye-bye. So that was the end of that episode. You know, this show is pretty good. I feel like I liked the first season better. The second season isn't bad. It's just not great. I don't know. It's, you know what it is? There's not a lot of super suit stuff. I like the super suit stuff, and it's very light on the super suit stuff, and that's why it's not thrilling me like last season did. But one bright spot is the Shade. Every scene that he's in is crazy good. It's a crazy good character because he's complicated, right? He's not one-dimensional. He's multidimensional. He even explains this in as we covered a few episodes ago when he tells Courtney's mother, you know, Eclipso is evil. I'm just kind of a jerk. So there's a difference. So, and that continues to be the case, and we'll see more of that as we talk about Summer School Chapter 11, but the actor, I think, does a great job, and the character is, I think, a great character. Neither good nor bad, because don't forget, he saved Dr. McNider, who thinks that he was trying to save the JSA at the time that they were killed. He is the one that tells them how to take Eclipso out, which we saw a couple of episodes ago. And so I think it's a good character. He's a bad guy, but at times they can work with him. It's kind of like a Magneto situation where he's like out of his mind and a bad guy, but sometimes he'll work with Charles if there's a bigger threat. Instead of opposing the X-Men, he'll work with them. If there's a greater good to be served for mutants than by opposing Charles. Anyway, I like this character. The actor does a great job. So Summer School Chapter 11 is the next episode. He's in this too, so we're going to talk about that. But we open on Pat coming home to Courtney's mother and Beth and Mike with Jenny after Courtney was sucked into the void or whatever it is by Eclipso. Next, we actually see Courtney, and she's in like a black and white version of the town, and she's lying on the ground, and she gets up and she verifies that, yeah, she's in Blue Valley, but it's different. In this version of the town, she goes to the diner, and she meets people that she knew in real life who are no longer around in real life, including Joey, who was her magician friend who does the card trick for her, leaving her holding a card with an E on it. So he's connected to this town, and it's not, his magic tricks aren't his own, I guess. The realm that they're in is playing with them. Anyway, she knows that they're dead in the real world. So she runs out of there and finds herself in school. As soon as she like runs out of the diner, she's automatically in the school where she runs into Shiv, who attacks her, triggering a fight between them, which causes Courtney to get cut and bleed, which apparently doesn't happen to anyone else in the realm, which is apparently, like I said, the Shadowlands. The girls stop fighting, and Shiv explains to Courtney where she is, after which Courtney vows to get home and goes through yet another door and ends up in her mother's place in the past. And she ends up getting pulled out of there by Shiv a couple of minutes later, at which point she explains that she doesn't think Courtney will ever survive there because she's too good. What was weird about this vision is she's in her mother's past, and her mother is complaining to like a babysitter, I think, or somebody, about how it's really hard being a mom, and almost basically says, I wish I never had my kid, which of course we don't know is necessarily reality. It's just maybe the shadow realm playing tricks, but that's what Courtney sees when she's there. Anyway, Shiv is then taken off by some goons when her own mother shows up, and she tries to reach her. Courtney gets lost in darkness chasing after her, only to be rescued by Dr. Midnight. He explains how the whole place is an illusion, that Eclipso is trying to manipulate everyone there, and that she needs to hold on to her inner light and not allow his manipulations to weaken it. Back in the real world, Beth has been communicating with Dr. Midnight, and she explains to Pat and everyone that Courtney is there with him. Jenny tries to hone in on the Shade with the ring because he just took off after he got his powers back while holding something that belonged to him. Dr. Midnight relays a story to Courtney about how he and the Shade had commiserated over what Eclipso had done at the time, back when they killed him, and how the Shade had sent him into the Shadow Realm to protect him from the ISA. Pat and Courtney's mom locate the Shade in a weakened state at a movie theater, as he lost almost all of his powers when Eclipso destroyed the diamond, and which I guess he did when he attacked Pat at the JSA, Pat and Courtney. And they inform him that Dr. Midnight is alive in the Shadow Realm before telling him that they need him to help them get Courtney out of there, at which point, after saying he doesn't think he can do it, he stands up and he gives it his best. He gives it his all, and he does, in fact, open a doorway to Courtney's location, but she declines to take the path out because she wants to rescue Cindy like a true hero, like a boss. And I thought that was very cool. Like I said, this season has had cool moments, and she's trapped in there and she's got a way out, and she almost goes, she says, no, I've got to rescue Shiv, whose name I guess is Cindy. And, she risked her own safety. She risked ever being able to get out of there herself to save another person who hasn't been the best to her and who's been kind of evil. But that's what a hero does. They save people, and it doesn't matter, if they're good or bad, as long as they're not like super duper evil, because sometimes a hero will let a super duper evil person die. But anyway, she goes in back to save Cindy. Of course, in the process, she runs right into Eclipso in the form of the child, which, by the way, is creepy. That kid is really creepy in the part, and it's unnerving how good that kid is at being a creepy little evil villain bastard at such a young age. Shiv, meanwhile, is strapped to a table in a lab where I guess a vision of her father is apparently experimenting on her, which I guess he did in real life. Courtney tries to ignore Eclipso as he's tormenting her, or trying to, and resist the urge to feel hate, but she can't. And she tells Eclipso that she hates him before finding her way to Shiv and freeing her from the torture by ignoring her father, at which point Shiv apologizes to the vision of her mother for hurting her in the past, at which point Courtney takes her to the portal and gets her out of there along with herself and Dr. Midnight just before the portal closes and the Shade collapses and dies, after asking Pat and everyone to tell the world that he died doing something good. And I was sad by this. I don't think they should have killed the character. I like the character. Again, he was complex. He was bad, but not all bad. And he could have been a hero. He could have had a nice redemption story. And I guess he kind of did, but it wasn't a full redemption. It was kind of a short I guess it was a full redemption, but it was like immediately after he had done something shitty. So I don't know. It wasn't as satisfying. It's not like it doesn't take like a long time to happen like it does in other redemption stories. But I don't know. I guess if he's going to be deceased, at least he redeemed himself. But I'll miss the character because it was a good character and the actor did a really good job in the part. The only other thing I would say about this episode is that I wish they had used Jenny more. Like, they brought Jenny in the first couple of episodes and she has the ring, and then they ignored her for a bunch of episodes, and now they went and got her, but like they didn't really do anything. Like, she's there, but like she's hardly used. I don't know. It's like she's really powerful, or she can be when she learns how to use the ring correctly, and they're just they're just not doing anything with her. It's kind of weird. But anyway, that's really all I have to say about this episode. It wasn't anything special. It really was just, okay, we put Courtney in a hole last time, now let's get her out of the hole. And it was a great sort of vehicle for the Shade to have a moment. But other than that, it wasn't really a whole lot to it. Anyway, I'll be back with a review of the next episode. Until then, I wish you all peace and long life.